Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one of those unbelievable moments where arrogance, assumptions, and a little bit of karma collide in the most dramatic way possible. Imagine walking into a luxury restaurant, minding your own business, dressed simply, not trying to impress anyone, and within minutes, a group of powerful executives humiliates you in front of everyone. They laugh, they mock you, and just when they think they've won, the truth comes out. The quiet man they just humiliated is actually the one person who controls the future of their entire company. It was a calm Friday evening in downtown Manhattan. The kind of evening when the streets glow with city lights and the most expensive restaurants are packed with business elites closing deals over wine and steak dinners. Inside one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, Crystal Oak, every table was reserved by powerful CEOs, investors, and high-profile executives. But sitting alone at a small corner table near the window was a man who looked completely out of place. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel wore a simple gray jacket, slightly wrinkled, a pair of faded jeans, and old leather shoes. His hair was a bit messy, and he looked more like a tired traveler than someone who belonged in a five-star restaurant. He quietly ordered a glass of water and a modest meal, pulling out a folder from his bag and reading through documents carefully. No one in the restaurant paid attention to him, until a group of executives walked in. 5 men in perfectly tailored suits, followed by 2 assistants carrying briefcases. They were loud, confident, and clearly celebrating something big. One of them, Richard Holloway, the CEO of Holloway Industries, spoke loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Tonight we celebrate," he said, raising his voice proudly. "By this time tomorrow, we will have closed the biggest deal in the company's history. $800 million. The men cheered and ordered expensive wine. The waiter rushed to bring their best bottle. Their table was only a few feet away from Daniel's. As the executives laughed and talked about profits, stock prices, and expansion plans, one of them suddenly glanced toward Daniel. He frowned. "Why is that guy sitting here?" the man muttered. Richard looked over. Daniel was quietly eating, reading his documents. Richard smirked. "This place really needs a better dress code," he said sarcastically. The men chuckled. Another executive leaned back in his chair. "Looks like someone wandered in from the subway." More laughter. Daniel heard them. Of course he did. The restaurant was quiet enough that their voices carried easily, but he didn't react. He simply continued reading the papers in front of him. The executives noticed his silence and mistook it for weakness. Richard raised his wine glass and walked over to Daniel's table. "Hey buddy," he said loudly, smiling in a mocking way. "You sure you're in the right restaurant?" A few nearby diners looked up. Daniel slowly lifted his eyes. "Yes," he replied calmly. Richard laughed. "You know this place costs more for one dinner than most people spend in a week, right?" Daniel nodded politely. "I'm aware." One of the executives at the table shouted jokingly, "Maybe he's waiting for someone to pay his bill." More laughter. The entire situation could have ended there, but arrogance rarely stops when it should. Richard suddenly picked up his glass of red wine and tilted it slightly. "Well, let's make sure you look the part," he said with a smirk, and before anyone could react, he poured the wine directly onto Daniel's jacket. The deep red liquid soaked through the gray fabric instantly. Gasps echoed around the restaurant. The waiter froze. Several guests stared in shock. Daniel slowly looked down at the stain spreading across his jacket. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then Richard burst into laughter. "Oops," he said sarcastically. "Guess you'll need a new outfit." His executives laughed loudly behind him, but Daniel did something no one expected. He didn't yell. He didn't stand up. He didn't argue. Instead, he calmly pulled a napkin from the table and gently wiped a drop of wine from his sleeve. Then he looked up at Richard, and smiled. Not an angry smile, not a sarcastic one. A calm, almost curious smile. Richard's laughter slowly faded. "Something funny?" he asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "No," he said softly. "I'm just wondering how you plan to explain this tomorrow." Richard frowned. "Explain what?" Daniel closed the folder in front of him and placed his hands calmly on the table. "The meeting," he said. The executives exchanged confused looks. "What meeting?" Richard asked. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a leather portfolio. He opened it and turned one of the documents toward Richard. The title at the top of the page was clear: Holloway Industries strategic acquisition agreement. Richard's expression changed slightly. How did you get that? He asked sharply. Daniel spoke calmly. I was reviewing the final terms before tomorrow's signing. One of the executives laughed. Nice try, buddy. That deal is private. Daniel looked at him. Yes, he said. It is. He then turned another page in the portfolio, this time revealing the ownership documents. The room slowly grew quiet. Richard leaned forward to read the name at the top, Carter Global Holdings. His face stiffened. Daniel finally introduced himself. My name is Daniel Carter. The name hit the table like a thunderclap. Every executive froze, because Carter Global Holdings wasn't just another investment firm. It was the parent company, the silent majority owner of Holloway Industries, which meant, the man they had just humiliated, owned the company they worked for. The color drained from Richard's face. You're Daniel Carter, he whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes. Silence swallowed the table. One of the assistants quickly pulled out his phone, searching the name online. Within seconds his eyes widened. It's him, he said quietly. Panic began spreading across the executives' faces. Richard's voice trembled. You were supposed to arrive tomorrow for the signing. Daniel folded his hands calmly. I arrived early. The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the waiters were watching. Richard looked down at the wine stain on Daniel's jacket, then back at his face. His confidence was gone. I didn't realize. Daniel raised a hand gently. No, he said. You didn't. Another executive tried to speak. Mr. Carter, this is a misunderstanding. Daniel interrupted him. No, he repeated calmly. It isn't. The men looked at each other nervously, because suddenly the power dynamic had flipped entirely. A few minutes earlier they were celebrating an $800 million deal, now they were staring at the man who could cancel it with a single signature. Daniel looked around the table. You know, he said thoughtfully, I came here tonight because I wanted to observe the people I was about to partner with. The executives listened carefully. I prefer seeing how people behave when they think no one important is watching. No one dared to speak. Daniel continued, and tonight, you showed me exactly that. Richard swallowed nervously. I'm deeply sorry, he said. Daniel stood slowly from his chair. The red stain on his jacket was still visible. I'm sure you are, he replied calmly. He picked up his folder and placed it back into his bag. Then he looked at the executives one last time. Fortunately for your employees, he said, this deal isn't about your egos. He paused. It's about the thousands of workers whose jobs depend on this company. The men looked relieved, but, Daniel added, leadership will be changing. The relief vanished instantly. Richard's voice cracked. Changing? Daniel nodded. Yes. He looked directly at him. Tomorrow morning, before the signing ceremony, the board will receive a recommendation. The room felt